All right. We're live and we already have a few people that have signed in. In fact, we got a couple of comments in here already. Kevin is saying good afternoon from Lakeland, Florida, and we've got Victor from Nottingham in the UK already. And Not Your Average Financial Podcast has said hello too. So everyone, we're here with Mark Willis. We're going to be talking about the new book that Mark and I wrote together, and we're going to be kicking things off uh, in exactly 53 seconds.
I'm David C. Barnett, and you're tuned in to Small Business and Deal Making, the podcast, YouTube channel, and blog where I talk about buying, selling, financing, and managing small and medium-sized businesses while controlling risk. So if you're looking to take control of your future through buying a business one day, or if you already own a business and you're looking to grow or exit, you've come to the right place. I talk about interesting things, I talk to interesting people, and I answer your questions every week right here. So be sure to hit like and be sure to hit subscribe, and let's get to it. Are you thinking of growing your business or beginning a journey into entrepreneurship? Take a shortcut to success by buying an existing and profitable business the right way. Visit businessbuyeradvantage.com and learn more about my online training, group coaching, and consulting services designed to help you win.
And big news about Business Buyer Advantage version 4 has now recently been released. It's a big new bit of news for us here, and I'm here with talking about a new book too. So there's like all kinds of new things happening, and more people are piling in. Mark, we've got people in South America joining us here today. Melody's from Argentina.
Hi, Melody. Wow, great.
Compass from Tucson, Arizona. This is great. We got a big crew to kick things off. And for those who don't know you, Mark, you want to give us just a quick introduction and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Glad to be here. So, David, this is a culmination of many months of great work. And I'm looking forward to all of what we're going to get into to help your audience, to help my audience, to help the world really, as they are suffering under a lot of the same things that business owners have suffered over for a long time. But again, my name's Mark Willis. I'm a certified financial planner here in the United States, working really all 50 states and really with clients around the world. It's a privilege to get to work with folks. It's my obligation to serve them as a fiduciary, but also just as someone who wants to do the right thing and help people live the very best life possible to reach their financial goals without taking a bunch of unnecessary risks. I'm big on risk. I'm a business owner, right? But I don't think we have a lot of space for unnecessary risk. I'm not 18 years old anymore trying to jump off the ledge onto a trampoline. I know that there has to be a way to reach my goal in the straightest, most efficient way possible without taking any undue, unnecessary risk. And so many business owners are crushed under those, unnecessary risks that bring people to their knees and bring them back to the banker's desk, begging and pleading. So a big part of our work is working with business owners who want to grow safe and predictable wealth, help them become their own source of financing, and to help them exit their business with confidence, which is what the book is all about.
Now, in case you guys don't recognize Mark, he is the show sponsor. And at the end of every one of my videos, there's a message about Mark and going to newbankingsolution.com, where you can see all of the different appearances that Mark has made on the show. And I believe this is maybe the 8th or 9th time that you've been on the show over maybe 4 or 5 years. The first time you were on was pre-2020, I think.
I think you're right. Yeah, it's wild to say, but we're approaching Star Wars territory with how many movies and films they have. So yeah, thank you again for your generosity and partnership and friendship. It's one of the best parts of being a business owner, I think, is just having the chance to play with people in the sandbox over and over again and do things together. So David, it's been a pleasure. And you've been kind enough to fly all the way down to hang out with me in Michigan and hang out with some other colleagues of mine in Michigan area. So it's been great working with you over the years.
Now, last year in 2024, I put out a new book, Buying versus Starting a Small Business. And I think it was around the time when I was doing the launch for that book, you approached me and you said, hey, maybe, Dave, since you've written so many books, maybe we should write a book together. And we started to do brainstorming, and I thought it was a great idea. It's my first time that I've ever written a book with someone else. And I got to tell you, there were definitely some new things to learn along the way here, like just like how do you organize yourselves together? And we eventually figured that out. We created a big Google Doc that we could share with each other. and we created an outline. And what I found very interesting about our project is we started the project with one particular type of idea, aim, or theme in mind, and we basically wrote that book, and then we sat back and realized that we'd written the wrong book
Hmm.
and kind of tore the whole thing apart. And I don't know, I think we only salvaged about 30% of the old book into the new one. But I think really since last fall, we put 8 or 9 months of work into this until finally it came together earlier this spring in the format
Yeah.
that we have today. And really what our goal was in this book was to try and create a frame of reference or a mindset tool for business owners to think about how they can reduce the risk in their business. And, what maybe you can share sort of who we thought that our ideal reader might be.
Yeah. Well, and that actually brings me to a question I have for those watching and participating. I want you guys to take a minute and just ask this question of yourself and put it in the chat if you can. Take a minute and ask, what's one hidden financial risk in your business, and how are you currently managing it? So it could be something that you're aware of or just now thinking about and you've never thought about it before. But what are some of the hidden risks in your business? Maybe they keep you up at night. Maybe they are just a nuisance to you, but it's a risk nonetheless, a financial risk per se. And how are you managing that risk right now? So that's what I want to talk about with you guys, because our ideal reader, to answer your question, David, it's that business owner that's made it through these solopreneur years, if you will. They've survived on grinning and bearing. They've survived on elbow grease and just working longer hours, but they've graduated from that. Now they're in the territory where the banks are starting to call them. They're starting to get that private banker saying, "Hey, you should set up an account with us," or, "Hey, how about a line of credit?" They're the kind of business owner that's got some profits. Maybe you can speak to some of the specific numbers there, but it's that middle market range. We're not talking about the giant corporations of the world. We're talking about the 99% of businesses out there, those small and medium-sized businesses that employ, let's say, 100 people or less, 100, 200 people or less or so, and have given themselves fully over to growing and scaling their business, but they're not exactly sure what they should be concerned about or worried about, and they don't exactly know where to go from here. They've lived on charm and their own skill so far, and now it's time for them to really build what's called a business, not just maybe an entrepreneur practice. So what would you add to that?
Well, I think too, it's also probably at a point in somebody's career as a business owner when they realize, uh, upon reflection, maybe how much of their success has come from their own direct inputs
Yes.
into managing operations and maybe handling those important accounts. And they realize just how fundamental they've been themselves in the business, and also they realize that a lot of the things maybe that they've been able to pull off did have a certain element of luck involved,
Mm,
and they're now
yeah.
realizing, hey, wait a minute, if those stars hadn't aligned the way they had, maybe I would have been in a much different position. And they're starting to have questions. A lot of times business owners will reach this point where they say, I can either carry on as I am, or I can try to grow bigger, maybe through natural growth of the business, or maybe growing through acquisition. They
Hmm.
start to examine these different potential pathways leading into the future, and then they start to look at their own plans with respect to retirement and things like that. And they realize, for the many of them for the first time, hey, I'm now in a position where I actually have something to lose. And having something to lose changes the way that people make decisions. That there's all kinds of hyperbole you can find all online about burning the ships and full throttle all straight ahead all the time, etc. But when you start to get to our age, I'm about to turn 50. I'm sort of that middle age bracket. You start to realize, hey, if I did lose everything and had to start over, that would really be unpleasant, and
Right.
I don't want to do that. So the book essentially is about how to turn your business into a resilient fortress that is going to allow you to build this base from which you have the resources to be able to make these kinds of moves in your business and personal life, but realize that you can retreat behind these solid walls. What would you say that
Yeah.
that's where the analogy comes from?
Absolutely. And it's serendipitous, but my daughter and I did some study on medieval castles during the period of our writing. And it was already picked the metaphor of the fortress that you and I were going to write this book. But having gone through that process of learning about the incredible, meticulous detail that was put together when building a medieval fortress, a castle, the treasure, meaning the keep, right? We have a keep. Where's our treasure stored? Do we have a moat protecting that fortress? Do we have several different? They called them like arrow holes, where we're shooting at the villains coming at us. Do we have walls of protection? Do we have, are we surrounded by water? Are we on the high ground? The metaphor actually goes pretty deep. And what's interesting is the more a castle was attacked, the smarter they were at defending. So they actually became stronger over time. And I feel like many businesses, they might have a checking account, they might have a business line of credit at the bank, they might have a couple of credit cards, and that's about it. They might have some inventory. I mean, is that a protective shield against interest rates going sky high like they've done the last few years? What about liquidity crisis moments where you have a medical need or your best employees leave on you all at once or whatever? I mean, the list of risks go on and on. What if you get automated and, removed from the industry entirely? What if robots take over your industry, in other words? So there's a number of risks that are really facing the business owner today that just won't be solved with a checking account and a couple of credit cards.
Yeah. So what we do with the book is we take people through a journey, and we share a lot of personal stories, and Mark shares a lot of his client stories as well. And the way that we've set it up is that each chapter is written by either Mark or I, and we bring you to different perspectives of the different sort of points of view with respect to your business and how you can think about your business differently. So a lot of business owners will start off by thinking about their business from the point of view of their income statement or their P&L statement. How many sales can I make? What are my costs? How much profit can I make, et cetera, which is very natural because it kind of stems from the day-to-day of what you do in a business. What a lot of people do not think much about is the balance sheet. And the
Right.
balance sheet is actually the snapshot that shows the resilience or the strength of the business. And it's funny because the balance sheet is one of the first things that a banker looks at, whether they're going to do a business acquisition loan or they're just going to make a loan to a business. And so one of the things that we look at in the book is how to look at your own business from the point of view of a banker or like a big landlord, like how these people assess risk when they're looking at a business like yours, and what sort of things they're looking for.
That's exactly right. And by the way, we've got a couple of people responding in the chat. I don't know if you'd like to read some of these, but Compass actually said Compass is referring to this book as the 48 Laws of Power of
Oh yeah.
De-risking Businesses, which I think is actually a really good way to put that. I think you and I talked about this book. Its intention is to be almost like a love letter or a field guide, maybe, to the business owner that we both serve so intimately. And having this almost field guide or construction manual for your business, the fortress of your business, is really what we were aiming for. Because you're right. I think one of the big gotchas or misconceptions is every morning, if you're like most entrepreneurs, you're going to swipe open your bank app and see what the balance is. And that's it, right? And then you go back to your day. So that's maybe as much attention we give to the balance sheet of our business. But what you're saying is so much more than the income. It's the balance sheet that really is going to be the shield or the protective wall. The outer ward and the inner ward of that castle is going to be the balance sheets. What assets are on the balance sheets? And more, maybe as important, what liabilities are sneaking
Right.
into the back door of your castle? So Ben Barry had some great comments there too, David. I don't know if you can see the chat or not, but we asked,
Yep.
what are some of the big risks of of your business as it is today? What's he saying there?
Well, he's talking about large amount of profits that can go to the tax man.
Yes.
We've all experienced that. Also seasonal dips, late client payments, surprise expenses that force people into high interest debt. So,
Yeah.
Ben's bringing up this comment about high interest debt. And so part of the conversation in the book is, looking at the different aspects of the balance sheet. We talk about sources of capital and the sort of pros and cons of all the different places where a small business can obtain capital. And, it's this trap I've seen so many people fall into. So they're operating their business as though everything's going just great and their level of profitability is going to continue forever. And then what of course ends up happening is the business owner starts to enjoy a higher and higher standard of living, right?
That's right.
And then all of a sudden something happens and the resources maybe aren't there to pay for these losses or cover these problems until they can fix or change the way that they're doing business. But you've still got to pay those bills, whatever you've committed to. And so what ends up happening is if you're not getting the cash flow from earnings, you have to find it from some other place. And if you haven't created the facilities to access capital at a reasonable cost, then you end up getting pushed into these higher cost spaces, which then further erode your future earnings because you've committed to more and more debt service at higher and higher prices.
Hmm.
And you know, I've I've commented many times that things like, merchant cash advance, it's kind of like the payday loan of the small business world.
That's right.
And when I meet people that have actually gotten into those traps, what I find is that often they have never made any kind of plan for any kind of hiccup or problem in the way that their business is operating.
Yeah.
When, when we, as many of you know, if you've ever seen the ad at the end of my YouTube channel, Mark works with people, and one of the tools that you use is the bank on yourself style of whole life insurance policies, and they've got all kinds of advantages in small business. But when we set about to write this book, one of the things that I said is I don't want to write a book that's going to get a bunch of one-star reviews from people saying they're just trying to sell insurance. So
Hmm.
what we do in the book is we talk about these different mind sort of frames of reference in talking about your business, and we talk about all the different kinds of tools that could be applied. So obviously, if you're going to make your balance sheet stronger in your business, it means controlling your debt and the types of debt you have and the variety of sources of financing that you have from a debt point of view. But it also means building assets, things like savings, investments, all that kind of stuff. And there's a wide variety of different ways that you can do that too. And we explore all of these in the book and sort of the pros and cons of each of them.
That's absolutely right. Yeah, I don't care what we call the asset as long as it's doing what we need it to do for our business. And you think about what are the functions of money, and is it aligned with our values as a business owner? There's a case to be made to diversify. A lot of people say diversification is important, and I agree, especially for certain circumstances. The business owner, the ones that I meet anyway, in this space of what you and I are describing, the vast majority of their net worth is tied up in their business, which is, like it or leave it, is a single asset, high risk, and oftentimes illiquid. There's no ready market to sell your business. I'll give
Yeah,
you
it can
a
take
quick.
years. It can take
Yeah, it can
years,
take years.
even if it's ready to sell.
Absolutely. There you go. And you know intimately what I mean by that, David. So, there's a gentleman I work with. He's been a client for many years. He runs a successful painting company, 7 figures a year of revenue, but he has never paid himself a real salary. And what do I mean by real? I mean, could he pay someone else what he pays himself? And the answer is no. No one else would take that salary. It's way too low. And there's nothing to show for it on his balance sheet either. Because why? Because he has a number of different major banks getting in his crawl. They're crawling into his cash flow and sucking out his entire salary. 6 figures a year going to a bank. And then he's got 3 or 4 of those. And this is just the regular routine where he's
And so
basically in debt to the banks.
so tell me about this. Is it that his business never grew to the point where it truly was profitable enough to pay him, or it just got big enough that he could qualify for some loans, and then he got onto
Yeah.
that treadmill?
Well, he got onto the treadmill. He basically had a number of different jobs that he was able to use. Painting jobs. He used that to leverage it into loans. He needed to buy the materials for those jobs, et cetera, et cetera. He hired too many people. He hired the wrong people. Dot dot dot. Right? There's all these shoulda, woulda, couldas in every business. And he wakes up a few years down the road, and he's in his late 50s, early 60s now, and he's saying, I got to save something for retirement, but all of my money goes to pay the bills, and majority of those bills are to banks, and the banks are the only ones profiting off of his hard labor. And of course, he's taking all the risk as the business owner. And so he was in my mind as I was writing this book, thinking, how do I talk to someone like him? And certainly he and I have one-on-one consulting conversations, and we do regular 6-month reviews as a certified financial planner. But I wanted to meet the million other business owners just like him who've fallen down that debt staircase, and they're just climbing up only to fall down again to get that next loan or that next credit card, et cetera. And you probably see it too. I'm curious.
I do. And so, when you are a small business owner / operator, a lot of the times it's you, and you are to have day-to-day duties with respect to how the business functions, and then maybe you have some people that are supervisors and stuff that are taking care of frontline employees that are serving customers or executing work or whatever it is that they're doing. But being that owner operator means that almost all the C-suite activities, if you want to think of a big company, are on your shoulders. And not all of those jobs are full-time jobs, right? But as a CEO of your business, at some point you have to take a little break and sit down and actually look at the performance of the business and figure out, where are we going, what are our goals, what are we trying to achieve, what do we need to work on, et cetera. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the part that's often missing for a lot of small businesses, is they don't sit down and look at, their balance sheet, their income statement, and see, what am I doing? What were
Yeah.
my goals this year? Did I have some kind of sales forecast?
You're exactly right. I'm just kind of curious for those watching. Oh, it's frozen on my side. Hopefully, we're still rolling here. But if David, if he's frozen, I'll ask a question of the audience here. What is one of the goals? First of all, do you write goals out? Do you write goals out for your business? I'm just curious if you guys are able to hear me right now. It was kind of freezing. David, are you there?
I am. Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. It was maybe, I don't know if it was me or who, but I was asking if anyone was listening. I don't know if I got disconnected or what, but is there, okay, someone does see, Compass says he or she writes down goals here. So I guess I was being heard somewhere. So anyway, yeah. Does anybody else on the audience listening here, do you write down your business goals? Like, that was what David was mentioning. What are we trying to achieve? What do we need to work on? And you said that's missing in a lot of small businesses. They really don't sit down and put much down on their goal sheet, or and not to mention their balance sheet.
Or they'll write some goals in December and say, here's my goal for next year. But then how often are you sitting down to actually make sure that you're tracking to those goals? It was interesting. Back in my banking career, I used to help people finance basically their days payable outstanding, their trade credit. I would help them push their payables further out and provide operating capital to companies. And I would often sit down with CFOs and I would ask them, I'm like, what are your goals for the year? And it was surprising, even bigger companies with 10, 20, 30 million in revenue, sometimes the CFO would have a hard time articulating what their goals were. And I would say,
wow.
Is extending your days payable outstanding and expanding your operating capital at no cost, would that help you satisfy your goals? And they would always say yes, which of course would open the door for my presentation and stuff. But understanding, where you want to direct yourself. And this is why we have the section in there about analyzing your own small business the way a banker might, or a big commercial landlord, like looking at the numbers and actually creating some goals for your business that relate to the actual numbers that appear in your financials. So you can actually work towards building that strength and resiliency.
David, that's such an interesting story you share about the presentation you had, and you would almost articulate a goal for them. And then they would say, oh yeah, I guess that's a goal. And then that's a door open right for you, right? And you were there to help them, of course. But imagine you were not there to help them. Let's say someone else other than you had walked through that door and also was able to convey a goal to them. Let me say it as clearly as I can. Guys, if you don't have a regular reviewed list of goals that you're checking maybe on a weekly, daily basis, someone else has a plan for you and your business's money. And that means I'm talking about, the outright crooks, but I'm also talking about folks like banks and banksters. I'm also talking about the Gucci bag that you really want to buy. People have a plan for your money, and that includes your business's money. In fact, it's one of the biggest targets, right? Not just the thieves, the people who come in to do money fraud or whatever, but I'm talking about like the spending of your cash will happen, and it's either going to happen intentionally or unintentionally. So I just want to underline that fact that having a direction and sticking to it and reviewing it regularly is so rare. It'll make you successful almost by default.
So Deborah here has put in an interesting comment here. She
Hey,
says,
Debbie.
"My 23-year-old son's initial goal is to simply make a monthly profit. He's been reducing staff, changing inventory, searching for other revenue streams to meet that goal." And that's an example of somebody clawing themselves up, right? Like trying to hit that place where they're making money on a regular basis. Now, here's the kind of trap that often happens, and Mark, you kind of alluded to people with nefarious sort of intent. But here's an example of someone without nefarious intent. So you could have a very profitable year, for example, and then someone like your CPA might suggest to you, "Oh, if you go buy some new equipment for your business, we can use maybe some kind of accelerated depreciation available to us in the tax code, and then you could, depreciate heavily that equipment in the first year and save a lot of taxes." And so, while that is very well intentioned kind of advice, if you
Yes.
don't really need the equipment, then what's happening now is you've converted good liquid cash into something now that is illiquid in the form of
Right.
equipment. And you've now closed the doors to a lot of different opportunities and choices that you might make in the coming year. And so even though that could be very good advice for somebody that needs equipment and needs to make that replacement, and now is the right time to do that, if you're just doing that move because you want Uncle Sam to get less money, you could actually be harming your business long term in other ways.
So true. That's right. Yeah, the liquidity cannot be overstated. It's and in the book we have entire chunks of this book, entire chapters and sections, really, of just what is the role of liquidity in your business and what are your options that help you know that you've got the best place to park your cash. We all want access, and we all want the yield and return that comes with things not being accessible. Right? It's almost like a seesaw. Either you can have a quick instant access to money in a green, in a shoebox under your bed. That's quick, easy access, but not exactly a great return, not exactly safe. Or you could put it into something that's triple leveraged and going to be locked up for 10 years. That also won't really help your business. It might give you a great rate of return, but not a great deal for access. So what is the balance? That's why we introduced the concept of a bank on yourself designed whole life insurance policy. And we not only talk about it from the business owner's perspective, like, yes, having one of these policies would be a place to park guaranteed increasing cash every single year that grows at a reasonable rate, but is also liquid and accessible to you for any reason. Can you imagine what that would do to your business? In fact, I'll tell a quick story, and this is another kind of solopreneur to bigger business kind of guy, but he had really designed his business around a line of credit. And it was $1 million line of credit at the bank. And he used it daily to operate his business, to help his sales guys do his thing, to buy inventory and everything else that a business needs. $1 million line of credit, until the bank went through a merger and had to eliminate a bunch of old accounts. And his was one of them. And so he got that dreaded phone call. He did nothing wrong. He just happened to have the wrong bank for that line of credit. He got the call saying, "I'm sorry, Mr. Business Owner, but we have to term out your loan. You can pay us $1 million now, or we can spread it out with interest over the next 5 years, but you cannot access this line of credit anymore." Oh crap, was the words that kind of went through his mind. And then, "I'm furious and I never want to deal with banks ever again," was his second thought. And so what he did was, over the next 5 years, he paid that line of credit down, but he also plowed money into a policy such that he had $1 million liquid cash value within 5 years. And he was able to use that cash value as his own line of credit to himself. So much like that fortress analogy, he's created a keep, right? A storehouse of wealth where he can then access that money whenever the dragons attack, and he can use it to protect his overall business structure. And ultimately, and we'll get to this later, I'm sure, but be able to use it as a golden parachute for him when he decides to exit his business, walking away with millions of dollars.
Yeah. The book does carry on to talk about succession planning. We talk about issues between partners, buy-sell agreements, etc. One of the big things that many small business owners are not aware of is simply the fact that 80% of small businesses that are put up for sale don't ever sell. And
A
so
big statement
there's
right there.
there's a lot of people out there who kind of have this idea that I'm going to sell my business as a big part of their retirement plan.
Yeah.
What we're teaching in this book is that you can build a more resilient business and create multiple, plan B, C, D, E's for yourself as a business owner. What happens if I can't sell the business? What happens if this happens, et cetera, et cetera? You have these other contingencies built into the very tools that also give you advantages while you own the business. It's no surprise to people that I'm a big fan of these policies. That's why I have you as a sponsor on the show, and that's why I own some of them myself. But we explore these other tools too. So, I mean, if people would rather just use a line of credit versus real estate or savings accounts or, investment accounts or mutual funds or whatever, and we give you the pros and cons of each one and why we we prefer some tools over others, just because they serve multi-duty in giving people not just the security and safety and access to the funds, but also the growth factor, and don't trip up any of the tax laws from some of these government qualified programs that people sometimes use.
Well, that's right. Yeah. What do you mean by government qualified programs? I think I understand, but why don't you spell it out for our
Well,
audience?
things like 401ks or RRSPs or
Mm-hmm.
any of these kinds of things that people might use as a vehicle for saving that gives them some kind of tax advantage. Well,
Mm-hmm.
yes, when you put money into them, there could be a tax advantage. But if you 24 months later need to somehow access that money for some business need, you then have these thorny problems of
Mm-hmm.
managing how you're going to get access to it. You end up triggering the taxes you avoided when you put the money in, or you just have to create some kind of. I know in the U.S. you guys can put up 401ks as collateral on loans. Uh, but then you're kind of like circumventing one of the key reasons why someone might want to use a 401k, which is creditor protection, right?
Creditor protection. And let me just say this too, there's loans against 401ks. This is actually one of the biggest gotchas in the American tax code for middle class. And here's what I mean. When you borrow against a 401k, generally, well, exclusively speaking, as far as I'm aware, you must repay that loan. And you must repay it with after-tax dollars. After-tax dollars. So it's coming right out of your paycheck, or it's going directly back to that loan that you took against your 401k. That's after tax, right? Well, that's the first time you're taxed on that money. And then fast forward to retirement. Then we're going to take money out of that 401k and spend it in retirement. And are we getting that money taxed again? Yes, we are. So this is the same dollar being taxed at least twice. Every time you borrow from a 401k, you're essentially signing yourself up for double taxation, which I think should be illegal in many cases, in my opinion. But I am curious, like, as it relates to the business owners watching and participating here in the chat, I put it in the chat here. For those of you guys who are planning an exit in your business, what does your golden parachute look like? What are you doing to prepare for that golden parachute, that exit moment? David just said a shocking statistic that 80% of businesses try but never successfully sell. What happens in that situation for you? While you're preparing your answers, I'm going to tell a quick story. And I don't know if I put it in the book or not, but it certainly would go in the epilogue if there was one. A gentleman was trying to sell his business. He had a couple of employees kind of interested, but he had not really done much about setting it up or negotiating a price. We went through a full business valuation consultation with him, and likely it would have continued, and we would have passed him off to David to do even more. But he unfortunately died. Unfortunately, it was a shocking, sudden situation, and he was just getting started on that business valuation when the unfortunate news came in, and now his business is in limbo. I mean, it's still around, but is there really? He was kind of the glue holding it together, right? And he could have built a more sustained, longer trajectory of of succession with a buy-sell agreement with some partners or some of his employees. And using life insurance, you can fund a buy-sell agreement. And if you use a whole life insurance policy to fund that buy-sell agreement, when the person passes away, the business automatically, boom, gets a surge of cash right when it needs it to buy out the shares of the business from the surviving spouse, so the business can carry on and the surviving spouse gets a big fat tax-free check. Woohoo! If the business owners survive and they live a long time, which is the goal in most cases, right? In every case, the business has this big pile of cash that they can use for operating their business, for buying new equipment, for marketing campaigns. And ultimately, if the person lives a long time, and that's again our goal, walk away from the business, sell it someday, and have a big pile of cash in your policy with you. One more very brief story, a different business owner, he had a big business owned policy, the ones that we're talking about here, owned by the business. And it was building up quite a bit of cash, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars for him. And he'd only started a few years ago. When he sold his interest in the business, and it was a 8-figure number, which is a good payday for him, part of the negotiation of that walkaway cash for the business owner was his policy. The one that was inside the business, he now has carried it out of the business, and it's his own personal asset that he can now use as another stream of income in retirement. So many people should at least know that this is an option because it helped his business survive some tough times while he was working. And as he retired, his big policy is now his to walk away and use it as a stream of income, or if he passes away, leave it to his family as a gift. So I'm just curious. Oh, yeah, go ahead, David.
Well, we have a point of clarification here. Concise Advice says it's not taxed twice. You were not taxed on the loan. I think just to clarify this, what you're saying is that
you're repaying the loan with after-tax
you
money.
repay the loan with after-tax money.
So you pay taxes with that, and then again in retirement.
Once you've repaid it and the money comes out in retirement, you pay taxes on the money that was initially tax sheltered originally when you made the first contributions.
That's right. Yeah. So what's the big goodie with 401ks is you're getting a tax deduction on your money, and you eliminate that tax deduction when you borrow against it and pay it back. You eliminate that tax deduction. So you're getting taxed once there when you repay the loan and once again in retirement. We can talk about it certainly further, but it's one of the biggest ways you can be taxed in essence twice on your money.
There's an interesting question here from Deborah. She says, are 0% credit cards a decent option if necessary? I'd like to address this one.
Please.
Because I know that there are oftentimes that come in the mail, a promotion. It often comes with a balance transfer kind of promotion. Like if you have money due on other credit cards, transfer it over to our card and we'll give you 0% for 18 months or something like that. Often, if you read the fine print, it will say that there is some kind of transfer fee, usually 2 or 3% typically. So if you're getting that 0% deal for 12 months, then really it's 3%, which obviously is a low number right now. The concern that I have is if somebody has a lot of outstanding credit card debt at high rates, then I think moving it to one of these 0% offers, it certainly makes sense because you save money. There's no question about that. But if you get one of these offers that says spend money on this new card for 0% for 12 or 18 months, and then you make a decision to go out and acquire new debt by buying some machinery or equipment for your business on that 0%, what, in my opinion, you're doing is you're gambling on whether you can pay it back before the end of the promotional period, or you're gambling on qualifying for other more reasonably priced debt at the end of the promotional period. I don't like to ever see people. Yeah, I don't like to ever see people take a chance on being able to qualify for credit in the future because we never know what the future is going to hold. What the economic conditions are going to be on a macro basis could make borrowing harder. Your own situation could deteriorate, etc. We often face this with seller notes when people want to buy a business, and they'll say, "Hey, I need you to amortize this over 10 years," and the seller says, "No, that's too long. Let's do a balloon payment in year 5." And my warning to business buyers is always, you don't know what's going to happen in year 5 if you're going to be able to refinance that somewhere else. And so there's other strategies we use to work around that. But I don't like to see people gamble on the idea that they're certainly going to qualify for credit in the future. Now, if you got one of those 0% credit card offers and you had one of these insurance policies like Mark describes, and you knew you had access to money in the future at a very reasonable rate, then you wouldn't be gambling. You'd be
So
taking advantage of this 0% loan.
would you mind, from your perspective, David, because I've been talking a lot about these policies, and obviously there's considerations with everything. And as you said earlier, we didn't want this to be a whole life policy book. It's a tool for your business to consider, and I think it makes sense for more businesses than currently own them, but it doesn't make good sense for everybody. Let me say it that way. But from your perspective, how does you borrowing from one of these policies compare to? I'll do two scenarios. One, borrowing from other forms of bank credit of some sort, like a line of credit. So that's one. Two, how does it compare to even paying cash for major inventory or equipment expenses, let's say?
Yeah, sure. So in fact, when people ask me about these policies, what I often say to them is I say, look, forget that it's insurance. Think of it more like a liquidity vehicle for money. Because what you're doing is you're building equity in an asset. The policy is an asset, right? And you're building equity in it with every payment that you make. So you more and more the cash value is your equity, like your home equity, for example. But the difference between a house and these policies is that house prices go up and down with different fluctuations based on market conditions. These policies only go up. And when you want to access the equity in a home, you have to qualify for credit. And you don't with these policies. You 100% can get access to that cash value anytime you want. And so it has all the features of any of these other kinds of equity building assets that you might have, with very few of the downsides. Now, you could argue that these other assets may grow faster at certain points in time, which absolutely is true.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, I take the approach of the barbell investing strategy. I'm taking a lot of risk in my business, so I want to have investment products that are extremely low or zero risk, which is what
Yeah.
these structures give us. Now, compared to using one of these policies to borrow against versus using cash that you might have sitting around. Well, I would say if you have cash sitting around, why wouldn't you put it into the policy and then borrow it back out? And then you have the policies growing in value while you're still getting access to the liquidity.
So
So
I'll be devil's advocate and just say, well, wait a minute. Why would I put money into a policy and do all these steps? I got money in my bank account. I need to buy a $50,000 tractor for my business or something. Why not just pay cash out of my savings account? Is there an advantage to borrowing from my policy and even paying a little interest on that loan? Is there an advantage there? I'm kind of pushing up against that here, David. What would you say to that?
well, I would say that there's always an opportunity cost in everything. So if you've got cash, it's earning something for you. If you spend the money, then you're not going to be earning whatever it's got going for you.
Mm-hmm.
So there's still that cost associated with using cash that's liquid cash. I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
the only problem would be if you thought that somehow future plans might be constrained by your decision. And that's why you have to have the right person to work with so you can actually brainstorm the different what ifs.
That's right. Yeah. Anytime the big wake up call for my life as a financial adult, but also as a business owner dealing with finances, is that you finance everything you buy. Everything is financed. Everything. Either you're paying interest to a bank or you're paying cash and you're passing up interest you could have earned on the money. I like to think of it like you're financing it from your future self when you pay cash for something, because you're breaking the compound interest you could have earned on the dollars if you had not bought that tractor or ice cream cone or whatever. When you use these policies, and this is why it's so important for business owners to catch this, your money can be accessed in the policy value, but it doesn't stop the compounding. You're borrowing against your cash value, not from it. And because you're borrowing against your cash value, it continues to compound as if you hadn't touched a dime of the money. And you've got the money out there using it for real life business or personal needs. I'll give a quick story and then I'll pass it back to you, David, for any comments.
Sure.
Gentleman had he had a couple of whole life policies. He ran a farm. He still runs a farm, actually. And he had borrowed against them heavily, $800,000 policy loan total to buy a big combine for his business, for his farm. And he was told, back to what you said about, making sure it's designed the right way and have the right person to work with. He was told by his financial professional that he was absolutely certain that these policies would continue to grow even when he borrowed against it. So he took the guy at his word. Well, it just so happens it's a insurance company that did not offer that provision. Not every insurance company designs the policies the exact same way. There's just different features, contracts, provisions in the contract. And this particular company, and most of them, by the way, do not allow the money to continue to compound when you borrow against it. I won't name the name of the company here, but if you guys want to chat with me about it, go to newbankingsolution.com and fill the form out. We'll be happy to talk with you, newbankingsolution.com. Anyway, he was furious when he found out 800 grand was no longer growing for him. And he had a super high interest rate loan against his policies, the highest in the industry. So it is important that you design these policies correctly. Now for him, and if you have a policy that's improperly designed, it is possible to do what's called a 1035 exchange, where you transfer the policies, at least in the United States, and I bet you it's in Canada as well. You can transfer tax-free from one insurance policy to a better one at another company, and set these policies up the correct way. So you got to have the right person to work with and brainstorm those what ifs, as you said, David.
So we have a question here from Tally T. Says, being a devil's advocate, are there alternative methods to accomplish very similar advantages without the specific whole life insurance policies being discussed?
I got one idea, and I'd love your thoughts. I mean, you can borrow against almost any conservative asset. Borrow against your house. So that's a home equity line of credit. You could borrow against a CD. If you have a certificate of deposit at the bank, you could get a loan there, a margin loan against your brokerage account. I mean, the list goes on and on. The difference is this: the banker is now in control. The banker sets the terms.
You have to qualify for credit.
You have to qualify. You have to kiss that ring, right? You got to go in, beg and plead. Can you imagine, back to our fortress analogy, can you imagine if you're the king of your castle or queen of your castle, and you're being attacked by dragons or hordes from the north or whatever, and all of a sudden you're like, okay, I need to hold tight there, Valkyrie and the rest of you Vikings. I need to go down to the bank and just see if I can get some weapons real quick. Hold tight, don't attack. I'll be right back. It'll take us 30, 45 days. Hopefully my credit score is okay. This is preposterous. But yet many businesses run their business hoping and praying that they'll get their loan right when they need it. Guess what, guys? Mark Twain was a genius. He said a banker is a fellow who will lend you his shirt, his umbrella when the sun is shining, but he wants that umbrella back as soon as it starts to rain. So anywhere else I can find to get a liquid, I mean, there are benefits to using the whole life policy. There are constraints. You got to get approved, right? There's a medical process and that sort of thing.
You actually have to qualify for insurance. You have to qualify. Yeah. So so Tally T, the additional things on top of the business and liquidity aspects, the additional things that pile on for me anyway, this was a big reason why I made this decision, is if I were to build just a bunch of guaranteed deposits at the bank and I use them as collateral, well, when I pass away, now there's all the estate and tax issues with handing down a large amount of money or with real estate or anything like this. Whereas if you do it within life insurance policy, the money all transfers tax-free to your heirs. So it's like, there are critics of these strategies who will say that because of the insurance component, it erodes the rate at which your money compounds. And they're absolutely correct, because there's a cost of insurance built into this scheme. But the benefit of that is, if for some reason you pass on, especially if you pass on early, then you actually get all of these insurance benefits, and they kind of wrap around your wealth and pass it to the next generation.
So I see we're about 10 minutes through here. I'd love to know, one, what can folks expect out of the book, David? What are some of the things, where can they get it? Let's just at least put in the chat, like the link to getting it, and also the goodies they can find at newbankingsolution.com as an extra.
Yeah, so it isn't in my Amazon bookstore. So if you go to dcbbooklist.com, it's right there. Even if you just go on Amazon, any Amazon store around the world, just look up the Business Fortress, you're going to find the book. Over at newbankingsolution.com, you're going to find embedded videos of all the different discussions that Mark and I have had together over the years about, in particular, the bank on yourself insurance plan or strategy. The book is not all about this. The book is for small business owners who want to build a stronger, more resilient business. And what you're going to get out of the book is a different way of looking at your own business. And you're going to get an appreciation for how other people assess risk in business and maybe how you should be too. The big blind spot that small business owners have is because they live in their business every day and they deal with the risks that are natural to their business. And because they haven't, gone out of business or anything yet, they develop this feeling that they can manage these risks, and these risks aren't as bad as other people might see them. But it's a very insightful point of view to sit back and try to empathize with other people, how they might see your business and how they might see how you operate it, and try to learn from that alternative point of view and maybe make some changes. You know, for anyone in particular who might want to sell their business, or if you do have some kind of big project which is going to require bank credit, you
Hmm.
would do well to stop and consider how those lenders or prospective business buyers are going to look at your business at some point in the future. And a lot of the times to get from A to B takes several years of work. And so it's not something you can often pull off at the last minute. You actually need to set yourself some goals and institute a plan to transform the business to make it into more of a fortress.
So I totally agree with that, and I loved the chapter 8, buying a business the fortress way. And I want to kind of understand, as folks are kind of as they're considering the book, and feel free to put the links as you want to, David, in the chat or elsewhere. You put it up on the screen, it looks like. Yeah, it's available on Amazon. It's available in paperback and Kindle, and there may be other formats coming in the future. Wink, wink. But you can tell us a bit about, if you would be willing to tell us a little bit about how you buy a business in this way of, how do you buy a castle, right? How do you buy it with this
Yeah.
fortress mentality set up from the beginning?
So I've had several clients over the years that have had these kinds of policies and other savings, in anticipation of doing something in their life. And at one point they decide, I'm going to buy a business. And so one of the downsides to buying a business is that if you do it with a lot of leverage, which most people do, borrow a lot of the purchase price, it then locks you into needing to make a payment to the bank, right? And so that payment is usually not all that flexible. Like you have committed to X number of dollars every month usually, and you've got to make that payment. And if you can't make that payment, you're usually looking at a 90 to 120-day window before bad things start to happen, where you end up in the special loans division of the bank. Other people are now investigating your every move. You have to have additional reporting. All the while, you're trying to hustle up front to make the business work again and to make some money. One of the great ways that you can use a tool like the bank on your self-insurance policy is that you can borrow money from it, but you get to dictate the repayment terms. And so what that can mean is, at this point of high leverage when you buy a business, if things do not go correctly or according to plan immediately, you have the option of simply not making a payment on that part of your debt if you borrow
Mm-hmm.
part of the money from one of these
It's a
policies.
big deal.
Now, that can give you time to make decisions, to change your strategy, etc. And it's that flexibility in the control of the access to the money that really sets this apart. I'm
Yep.
a firm believer in not putting your last nickel into a deal, because your back is up against the wall right from the very beginning. One of the scary things that see buyers do when they buy a business is they get over leveraged. They put too much borrowed money into a business. But even established business people that grow through acquisition can still make the same mistake. They can take a really strong balance sheet and weaken it tremendously by taking on a whole bunch of debt. And so it's not just how much you borrow, it's where you obtain the money from that can actually have a
Mm.
huge impact on whether or not you're successful.
That's a big deal. Let me tell a very brief story underlining your point about buying a business. So there was a gentleman I worked with a few years ago, and he's still a client today. He had just left his software job, his big business job. He had a lot of appreciated tech stock in his portfolio, one company. Okay, so he was concerned about this kind of over exposure to one company's stock risk. So what we did was we removed some of those stocks, sold the stocks, put it into a high cash value bank on yourself designed whole life policy. His desire and his dream was to buy a business. And he used the policy's cash value to essentially, it was a good several $100,000, close to $1 million in there. He borrowed the money out to go buy a garage door business. And he's now very profitable, doing just fine. And but not at first. So it took him about a year to get profitable, and he didn't have to pay on that policy loan at all for that year. So he was able to carry that loan. He's, in essence, his own source of financing. He set the terms. So he waited until his business started kicking off cash to repay that loan. And now he's doing so, and it's all worked out great. Folks wonder, well, what happens if? Well, if you never pay off the loan, the policy could lapse if you're still alive, or you could carry that loan all the way to your grave, and it's just deducted from your death benefit when you pass away. So there's all sorts of things to discuss.
This is why the insurance company will give you this access to liquid capital, no questions asked at any time, because they never take any risk on you, because ultimately they owe you the money anyway at the end.
Yeah, right. That's right. That's right. Yeah, no having to kiss that ring of the banker down the street.
Yeah, Mark, this has been awesome. This is the thickest book I've ever written, but I realize it's because you wrote half of it.
That's right. That's right. You did a great job, guys. Every time you get a chance to be around David, take it, whether it's in person or virtually. He is just a couple of phone books worth of dictionary information, wisdom, insight, but not just vocabulary words. He's a lived it on the street kind of guy when it comes to business success, how to grow, protect, and exit your business with confidence. I couldn't think of a better co-author to write this book with. And his wisdom is really manifested in this book. So it's called The Business Fortress: How to Grow, Protect, and Exit Your Business with Confidence. David, I want to just say publicly in front of everybody, thank you for this great opportunity to partner up with you, play in the sandbox with you some here. Maybe we can help just a wall full, a giant truckload of business owners, millions of them across this country. And guys, if you have not yet checked out the book, now's your chance. Buy one for yourself, buy one for your friends, buy one for the business owner in your life. And go to, you can either go find it at, what was the website that you have?
It's dcbbooklist.com, which is, it's just my, it's people years ago, Mark, used to ask me for recommendations about what to read. So I found this feature on Amazon where it lets you make a bookstore. So it's just cool. All the books I've ever read that I thought are useful to small business owners are in there, including ours. And it's an easy way for people to find it. But if you just go to Amazon and look for The Business Fortress, you're going to find the book as well.
Wonderful. We'll put the link in the chat there as well. And I'm seeing in the chat several people have already bought copies and bought several copies. So thank you to those who have purchased. And feel free to share this with others. Other people, other businesses need to know this is out there, at least as an option for running their business in a more sane way. The field guide, the love letter to the business owner, the construction manual for building your castle to protect your business. Couldn't have asked for a better co-author. So thank you, David, for being a part of this journey with me.
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate it. And you're very easy to work with as well too. And you know your stuff. That's for sure. So thank you so much. And pick up your copy today. And if you've ever used any of these strategies in the book, put your comment down below. We'd love to hear about it. And please, if you haven't already, hit like, comment, share the video, etc. Everything that you do to interact with any kind of content of mine helps the algorithms know that it's good content and helps to bring it to other new viewers that may find it useful. And of course, our mission here is always to help people avoid mistakes, help people avoid bad deals. And even after you get yourself into a business, there's still risk around every corner. This is the riskiest asset class that exists. And that's part of the reason why you need to reduce risk, even in the operation of the business, and build yourself a fortress to make things more resilient and make sure that you've got what it takes to survive. Especially as things become more turbulent here as we go.
That's right. We're not done with volatility yet. I don't know the future, but that's one thing I can say for sure. So, and if folks want to dig deeper, learn more, or even reach out to us directly, I guess the website to go to would be newbankingsolution.com. That's newbankingsolution.com.
That's right. All right. Thanks, Mark. We'll see you later. And for everyone else out there, thank you so much. We will talk to you next time.
Build that forward.
So, how can you learn more about buying, selling, financing, and managing small and medium-sized businesses? Easy. Go over to my blog site, davidcbarnett.com, where you can learn more about me and how I work with my clients. You can learn more about my books and courses that I've prepared for you. You can find out how to subscribe to my email list, the YouTube playlists, and more. There's literally hundreds of hours of content there, all for free, and I'd love for you to be my guest. Special thanks go to Mark Willis at Lake Growth Financial, today's video sponsor. Mark helps people better manage their personal and business finances through the Bank on Yourself insurance strategy. This is something I've done personally and I've seen others use it successfully for years. Go to newbankingsolution.com to find all the interviews I've done with Mark and learn more about the advantages of these programs. While there, sign up for a free consultation to learn what this solution might look like for you.